Hey, so like you said, I'm Mike with the Mike Stevens. My ministry, I had to think about this a lot because I don't really have like a defined role, like say a pastor of some sort, like a defined. But what I do, I'm with Alpine in Layton, and what I do is when an ex-Mormon steps into the church for the first time and actually allows someone to talk to them, and I hold the ex-Mormon title for a purpose. Now, I do say I'm a Christian, but the ex-Mormon title is for authority for these ex-Mormons. But I take them from the moment that they finally allow someone to talk to them, and I shepherd them through the process, and I hook them up with mentors that I've kind of raised up, and hook them up with those mentor relationships, but still keep in contact. And then I take unexpected Christians, and I put them in my small group, and I lead a small group there, and they come in and they don't know what they're doing, and then they realize that half the group is ex-Mormon, and now they got to learn how to speak to that culture. So I take all these people that come from the base, and I say, hey, we have a small group for young adult or young families, and join, and then they join, and then there's a bunch more ex-Mormons in that group. So they learn that, but I take those Mormons and walk them through the whole process there. So that's what is that the full question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Lisa Brockman, and my husband and I live in Orlando, Florida. I came to Christ in college at the University of Utah, and then joined the staff of Crew, back then Campus Crusade for Christ, and then my husband was recruited to Orlando, so we've been in Orlando for 26 years, and lots of different ministry, from campus ministry to lots of ministry. But presently, I'm a spiritual director, and so I get to spiritually direct some staff women, and my passion is spiritual formation. So I lead spiritual formation groups and work on just help equip our staff in their spiritual lives with God.
My name is Jason Doman. I have the distinct pleasure of being the youth pastor at Alpine Church. I cover all of their campuses, so that has been my official position for the past a little over 2 years. Before that, I served in the youth ministry just as a volunteer for about 4 years, and during that time I was also a worship team leader at Alpine.
Okay. So how did you become LDS, and how long were you in Mormonism?
All right, so super long story. I'll condense it for you guys. I came out of Mormonism. It's been about a little over 8 years now. My wife and I were kind of Jack Mormon, if you will. We were on again, off again, kind of living that cliche life. Our first son was born, and we talked about it, and we thought, we really need more God in our life. We want our kids to grow up knowing Jesus, and so we went to our bishop at the time and let him know, hey, we want to get our son blessed. And it was this conversation about, did you want to do the blessing? And for me at the time, I knew that I wasn't worthy, so I said, no, I won't do it. I'm gonna have my brother-in-law do it. He said, well, do you want to stand in the circle when you do this? I said, yeah, of course I do. So we kind of did this little go around for a little bit. He said, okay, I'll make you a deal. If you come to church if you come to church every Sunday up until that point, I'll let you stand in the circle. And this was in November. The blessing was going to be in March. And for me, it was easy because it was like, well, we want to come to church and we want to be here. And so I reversed on him and made him a deal and said, hey, listen, while I'm coming to church, I want to be here because I want to be here, so don't try to give me a call. I served an LDS mission. I knew how that worked. I knew that I was considered a less active member. And in that role, it's easy to take a less active member, you give them a calling, and then they feel like they have to be there at church, right, for their calling. So I reversed a little bit on, said, don't give me a calling, I want to be here because I want to be here. All right, our son, we got him blessed about either the week after or 2 weeks after that became moved to calling. And we did the rounds, and we kind of stepped away from the LDS church again. Our next son was born 2 years later to the day, and we kind of did the same thing. And it was just really this whole process of, listen, I want my faith to be based off of me wanting to be here and having this relationship with Jesus. So even though I wasn't a Christian at the time, I still knew what I wanted, and I wanted that relationship with God. And so my wife, we just decided, hey, let's just go to another church. You grew up LDS, you're taught that you're Christian. We thought, let's just go to another church. We'll find a non-denominational church, so it won't be weird, and it'll just be exactly like what we're used to, a little bit different. So she came home with a stack. There were 17 papers in this stack. I pulled one out at random. It was Alpine Church. We showed up that Sunday. I was in my suit and tie, stuck out like a sore thumb. Saw the coffee over on the table, and I was like, oh boy. We walked into the auditorium, and there's a rock concert on stage. I was like, I don't know what we've gotten into. And then the music started, and it wasn't about a man. It wasn't about pioneers. It wasn't about anything other than God. And that was the first thing, and music has always been a big deal to me in my life, and so that was the first thing I noticed. The next week, my wife had to work, so I got up and got the boys ready and went to church, which is something I wouldn't have done for years before that. And the pastor, it was Pastor Brian, I don't know if you guys know Pastor Brian Dwyer, he was on stage, he was teaching, and he said something about Jesus being God, and my head exploded. I thought, what did he just say? And as he continued on in the sermon, things just started clicking into place, things started making sense, all these questions I'd had about faith and who God was and why he's done what he's done, and everything just started clicking. As soon as the sermon was over, I ran out to the car, I got in, I called my wife, and I'm like, hey, this guy that was just talking, he said that Jesus is God, and she's like, wait, what? Like God? I'm like, yeah, like God, not a God, this is God. And so she's at work, and her mind's exploded, and she keeps texting me, and I'm like, we need to get done with work, we'll talk about this when you get home. And she came home, we had this conversation, and from that point on, it was just, everything clicked, man, and God just started working on me, and that was my conversion point. So that was a little over 8 years ago, so I was LDS for 30 years, and yeah. Sorry, I guess it really wasn't the short version. But.
That was the awesome version. Okay! It was just clicking. Like, you were so right.
It was incredible.
God rocks. Okay. Did you ask Sergeant, like, yeah, I was born Mormon, is that what you I was absorbed.
Tell your story.
My story? You're going to hear the extended version if you're there tonight. But short version, 6th generation Mormon, devout family. My parents are still very devout. Grew up believing all of it from the time I can remember. It was the true church, Joseph Smith was a true prophet of God, all of that. And I worked really hard to be worthy. I wanted to be worthy so badly. And from the time I was probably 8, I knew there's this shadow side to me that's not worthy. And so I began to hide that. And that was my journey. So throughout my childhood, throughout preteen years, I lived in that tension and swung on that pendulum, but presenting worthy. And then by the time I got to my senior year in high school, a lot of my friends had fallen into the party scene, and there was something so attractive to me about being released from the shame and living in that tension for a night. And I resisted for 3 years, and then my senior year of high school, I just delved into that world as passionately as I had lived Mormonism, and shut down my conscience one night at a time. Very vividly remember when I took the Lord's name in vain the first time, when I said that word, when I did that. So I can still point back. It was very emotional, that whole journey, but it did release me from the shame. And so I swung from legalism to licentiousness and lived that life with passion. And I was supposed to go to BYU and play tennis there, but because I was living this life, I didn't want to surrender to those standards. So I ended up at the University of Utah, and a friend on the tennis team lined me up with a guy named Gary, who was a born-again Christian, who was partying as hard as I was. And so it was through that relationship, I'll never forget when he told me he was a born-again Christian. This was 1988, and I was like so sheltered, no internet. I'd never met one of those, I'd never heard that word. And I was like, that's cuckoo. I don't know what you just said. I've heard of Lutheran and Catholic, and I had a Jewish friend, but not, what's that? So that's where we began. And then a month into our relationship, Gary said, how do you know the church is true? Well, because I've had a burning in the bosom. And that was the beginning of that solid foundation turning to quicksand. And so it was a 9-month long, it was very intense, where we would party Friday and Saturday and have Bible study on Sunday. And I'll leave the rest of the story for tonight, but after 10 months, I ended up coming to Christ.
Lisa, is there a place that people could like read this story?
Well, thank you for that pitch.
Why didn't I get it set up?
There is, if you want all the juicy details, and I mean all of them almost. I just had my story published, and it's called Out of Zion, Meeting Jesus in the Shadow of the Mormon Temple. And it is a very loving and compassionate, you will walk with me through my story into Mormon culture, into Mormon doctrine, but it really brings out the culture, because you cannot effectively, as you know, reach the heart of a Mormon without bathing in the culture. And so, because my family, all but one brother, are still very strong LDS, they were on my shoulders the whole time I was writing. And so I would love to share it with you, and I really do think it will equip you and your congregations to engage very compassionately with Mormons. But I want to say also, I'm so thankful for you. I'm just sitting listening to you guys and how God's giving you a heart for these people. And two of my sisters, see Michelle, and she does their hair, and we met this morning. And I just can't tell you what a gift to have any one of you involved in a Mormon's life.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's hard to follow this. So I come from a background that if any of you have read the Doctrine and Covenants, my family is in there. I'm a Murdoch. I come from the Murdoch line and also the Stevens line. But so I don't know how many generations that is, but founding, I guess. So I was raised in an extremely devout family, and I guess my story kind of starts out when I fell away. Well, I mean, my rebellious years were drinking coffee. So I've been drinking coffee for a long time.
They kept you out of the temple.
Actually, snuck in. I went on a mission to Louisiana, and that's kind of where it started. About 16 years before I found Christ, I had a good Christian run into me. I had a lot of Christians run into me, but one specific one that he talked about Romans, and that's all he talked about. He didn't do what a lot of them do, which is, you know, all the weird doctrine and stuff that they talk about. But he just opened up that, and that was like the first big thing on my shelf, huge. And I carried that little stone in my shoe forever. But I left because when I was in Louisiana, and this was in 2001, we were hit with the Rock in the Hat thing, yeah, which wasn't really known back then. And President Hinckley came and he spoke to about 20 of us. And I asked him about that, and he told me it was absolutely false doctrine. That none of that was true. And don't believe anyone that says otherwise. And then the church released the essay, which, I found Christ after my mentoring relationship with Ross. I went through the atheist transition there, so much so that even the Universalist church was too much church for me. So that's kind of where I went. And then one day my wife kind of did the same thing that Jason talked about, which was, hey, we're going to have a kid soon, so let's find a church. And of course, I was Christian, so I started looking at all the weird churches like Buddhism and stuff, and she's like, no, Christian. So we randomly picked a church and ended up at Alpine 2, which, about actually the same time, maybe a year difference, but yeah, that started my journey. I went to the back of the church and escaped before anyone could get to me for about 2 years, so a long time. And then finally started asking questions, and that's when Ross approached me. And then I finally saw the light, I guess. But yeah, so my story was long, 16 years from when I can place it, that start.
What was the most difficult part about leaving Mormonism?
Losing everything. It's hard to put words on that, but it's everything. You lose everything. You lose your identity, you lose your family, you lose your faith, and you just don't, someone pulled the carpet right out from under you, and there's a hole under the carpet, and you just kept falling. I mean, I don't know how to really explain that anymore, but it's a complete loss. Just from everything, family, your belief system.
I can't talk yet. That triggered me. Living in Orlando, I can escape this conversation. I never want to move back here. I never want to move back. I'm so grateful for you to watch.
Well, that sounds great right now. For me, I'll just be honest, my journey out was very blessed. My wife and I happened to be on the same page, the same time, the whole way through. There was never any push and pull in our marriage. There was never any doubts with each other. It was very blessed. So the hardest part for me was probably the anger that ensued. After realizing that I had bought into this deceit for so long, and it changed me, and I became very jaded. And even though I had this side of me who was so enthralled and on fire to hear more about this God, I hated Mormonism. I hated it. And I wanted to fight with everybody I could find on Facebook, any argument I could get into, any opportunity I had to prove them wrong, I was there. And that was a good 2.5 years of my life after leaving. I was living this double life with so much hatred and anger over here, and this love and just enthrallment with God over here. And so that was probably the most difficult part. And it was a close friend at Alpine, who is a close friend now, wasn't a very close friend at the time, but approached me and said, hey, listen, let's talk about what you're doing on Facebook, and opened my eyes to that. And it was, unfortunately, I just got here, but I caught the last end of, I think his name was Bobby, was talking about, hey, listen, if we lead people away from Mormonism, but we don't lead them to Christ, and that was brought to my attention, and that's what I was doing. Like, I was showing them how their faith was wrong, even though I wasn't succeeding, right, because they still had the blinders on. In my eyes, I was proving them wrong. I wasn't leading them to Christ. I was just leading them out of Mormonism, and so this close friend now brought that to my attention and said, let's rework that. Let's take what you have over here, this love and this new hope and faith that you have, and lead them towards that instead of just bring them on board with your hatred and anger of what's been lied to and the deceit that they've been bought into. So
I would say it's really hard to categorize what's the hardest part of leaving Mormonism for me. Definitely that conversation when I told my parents, I've placed my trust in Jesus Christ alone for eternal life. And the fallout that pursued for years. And every time, 2 months before my book was published, that Harvest House publisher started to engage me in marketing. And like, for 3 weeks, I couldn't eat. I was ramped up, shame, self-contempt. My mind was totally gripped with shame and self-contempt. Like, if I made all this up, I'm so confused. Total confusion, panic, anxiety, and people would like send me scripture verses, and I'm like, I know, but that's not dropping to here. And it was 3 weeks. I lost like 10 pounds, and I realized that's a hard way to lose 10 pounds. No, I realized that it was, but that was the only benefit of the whole process. What was happening is I received an email from my discipler, who was my discipler with Crew at the University of Utah after I came out of the church. And she said, Lisa, you're not entering into new territory. This is old territory. You've been here before. And I realized I'm having a PTSD storm. And it's been 29 years since I left that church. And thankfully, I know about trauma because we adopted 2 older girls from Ethiopia. So at least I knew, oh my gosh, I haven't seen my therapist for a year, which I saw her every week while I was writing my book, because there was so much trauma. So you can't underestimate losing your culture, losing your family. I lost all my friends, and they would mock me. It wasn't just dismissal, it was mocking, and the relationships alone. But then you go to a church, and it's like, I felt like I was in somebody else's clothes. It's like, this is so uncomfortable, like nothing's normal. So that's the short of it.
Good luck, Mike.
You already shared. You did a good job. You brought me to tears.
Would you say your attitude was similar to Jason's after you came out?
Oh yeah, I was angry, so angry. I mean, I could have gotten fist fights with people that was so angry that I had been lied to for so long, and now you're trying to lie back to me all these things, which actually kind of bled into me going atheist as well, because this Joseph Smith guy lied to me. Well, what about this Jesus guy 2,000 years ago? I mean, you know, like lies. It's all lies. So, but I was super angry. I mean, so angry. Yeah, I mean, keyboarding troll on Facebook. No, I mean it all. So, yeah.
Keyboarding troll.
Yeah.
Let's turn it to maybe a more positive note. Thank you guys for sharing that. I hope we all remember how difficult this is. I think it's easy to forget when especially if you're in like pastoral or church ministry, you're so busy trying to run things that you forget the human cost. You forget that people suffer persecution here in, I think, ways that we don't recognize in other parts of the United States. I hope you will listen to what they said. Take that with you when you go back to wherever it is you're serving. Who helped you as you, I know you mentioned for us, but tell us a little bit more. Who helped you as you transitioned into biblical Christianity? And how did you meet them? And how did they care well for you? How did they shepherd you well?
Well, I've had a few.
In fact, I know a lot of your faces in here from your videos, from the things you've released, from speaking at the temple, that sort of thing. So a lot of you have had impact on me through those things, because when I left, I was hungry, so I took everything, just sucked it all in. But relationally, with a one-on-one basis, it was Ross. Just kind of came up to me out of the blue. I didn't even know he knew who I was. I mean, just hiding in the back,
Ross knows all.
But, relationally, he really guided me out in a sense of, he just kind of let me talk and let me just kind of out, and he would listen, and then he would pick up on the deeper thing that was being released, and he would give me stuff to study on my own, and then we would come back with that, and we would discuss it, at lunch. I think someone mentioned that. Well, actually, it was coffee, but Ross drank tea. So,
It was still evil.
Yeah.
It was still evil.
We still have a relationship to this day. We took a little break over the summer because he's had this conference to prepare for, but through that he mentored me out and into a believing relationship. Grabbed the reins and went, whoa, when I, went to do like a Lee Baker type, preach on the streets type thing, and kind of reined me in, and then has continued to mentor me now, as I've learned and kind of raised up into what I'm doing now. But everyone in here that has done anything with the Mormon community, as far as like posting stuff online or anything like that, you've had a huge impact on me. So.
For me, Gary, my boyfriend who led me to Jesus, he took me to a Campus Crusade meeting at the University of Utah about 8 months after I trusted Christ. So I'd been going to a little Bible church with him at a wedding reception center. That was so odd. We would go occasionally, but I don't know that church knew what to do with me back then. I'm a single college student, and they were nice, that church, but there wasn't much support at all. And then when Gary took me to the Campus Crusade meeting, they didn't meet Mormons who came to Christ back then. Ever. And so they were like ticks on a dog. Let's get her. Follow her up. And so it was like April, we were almost breaking for the summer, and one of them got me and took me through basic follow-up, and I was like amazed that people raise money to spend their lives doing that with students. I was blown away. And so they then chased me around campus. It was 14 months after I trusted Christ before I surrendered all my major idols and addictions. And they chased me just so faithfully. And so I would say Cru became my family. Without Cru, I really don't know what it would have looked like, because I ended up going to First Pres downtown because that's where the campus director taught Sunday school. Nobody talked to me. Nobody talked to me. I was like, that was one of the hardest transitions out of Mormonism. This is the loneliest place on earth, this Christianity. That was my experience. And to this day, in Orlando, when I hear the panel talking, the first crowd, I'm like, man, we don't do any of this intentional discipleship, mentorship. It's pathetic. I'm sorry, don't quote me. Anyway, all that to say, it's been a very lonely Christianity outside of Crew. Crew has been my family.
I don't know if I can really pinpoint. I think GotQuestions.org was probably my most faithful companion through the whole process. I was very standoffish, I think, at that point. Because I'd spent so much time, especially come from my mission, people would say, you know, you're not really a Christian. And it was like, well, my badge says Jesus Christ on it, my church says Jesus Christ on it, like, you're an idiot. Is kind of, you know what I mean? Like, nobody ever took the time to really sit down and be like, let's talk about the Jesus you believe in, let's talk about the Jesus that I believe in. Nobody ever sat down, and so as we kind of transitioned out of that, I mean, this is years later, but as my wife and I transitioned out of that, I still have that mindset, like, I don't want to hear what you have to say right now. I kind of want to figure this out on my own, and I kind of want to do my own research and get to know that Jesus that way. Doesn't mean people didn't try. So there was a lot of people who tried at Alpine to come. And if I had to really pick somebody, it was probably Pastor Scott Krebs at Alpine. I think it was mostly because he was the youngest pastor on staff, and I'm kind of a night owl, so my questions come up at like 1:30 in the morning, and he was the only one I really felt comfortable. It felt weird to text Ross at 1:30. And so Scott was great, so I would text him, and he would be like, hey, I'll get back to you in the morning. Like, I woke him up, but he's like, I want to talk to you about this, but I'll get back to you in the morning. But so he was probably, and then from that stemmed a great relationship that I have with him now. I still go to him when there's things that pop up, and I'm like, I can't tell if I'm still confusing this with Mormonism or what's going on in my head. So yeah, so probably Pastor Krebs would be who was there.
What got you involved in serving in ministry? Now you're the youth pastor for this large church.
Yeah, I mean, that's easy. I was pulled to youth because I'm immature and I'll do stupid things. I have no shame. I wear my hat backwards. So for me, I looked at it as, I saw what was happening in youth, and I thought, I wish I would have had something like that growing up, because there still isn't. You know, there's mutual activities and young men's and young women's stuff, but there's nothing like what you see at a midweek activity at a Christian church. And for me, I was like, I first wish I would have had that, but also, what an opportunity to make an impact on the youth. What an opportunity to hopefully instill something in them that when they graduate from high school, they don't walk away from school, from home, move out on their own, but also walk away from Christ. And so there was just a need that I felt there, and I fit in. Don't get me wrong, I'm still the weird old guy there at youth, and it's still, it was a good 6 months before I felt comfortable talking to him. Like, they just looked at me like I was the weirdest person ever. But after that point, it's just been these amazing, fruitful relationships, and as hard as it is to hear what our teens are dealing with, I thought, I look back on my childhood, I'm like, that was so easy compared to what they're dealing with. And I just, you know, as a youth pastor, I would encourage parents, man, our kids are struggling. And it's so easy for us to look at it and be like, that's the dumbest thing to worry about, or that's the dumbest thing to care about. But it's real to them, you know, and so it's so easy for us to downplay what they're experiencing and what they're going through and what they're seeing online. We just never dealt with that, and so it's so easy for us to look past and say, they'll get over it, they'll move past it. They are struggling, and they are hurting, and so if you have teenagers, just really be aware of what's going on in their life. And so that for me, it was an easy need. I fit the part, and there we go.
Yeah.
That was, how did we get involved in ministry? Yeah. My 21st birthday, which was about 14 months after I trusted Christ, I surrendered alcohol, guys, the things that I'd looked to for life, addictively for several years to the Lord. And I woke up the next morning and it's like he'd done a heart transplant and a brain transplant. And I just, 6 days later, went to a Crew Christmas conference. I wasn't planning on going. I hadn't been going to Crew all fall. They were chasing me still, so I knew about this conference. And when I was there, I still hadn't told my parents I'm a Christian and leaving Mormonism. And I was there, and Dr. Bright, the founder, came, and he challenged us. He invited us to come help change the world, and as he was speaking, something in me moved. And there was vision of how I can come help change the world. And I'd been given a vision of life with God that was so compelling. It was now, the love of Jesus was now giving me the courage to leave what I'd always known to be true and the comfort of that and the culture. And so it was Dr. Bright's invitation. I just knew this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And so I would say that's when I was called, and then I was like, crap, now I have to go tell my family I'm a Christian. So, but there was never a wavering after that moment. I just knew there's nothing else I want to do than tell people about this Jesus.
So, ministry, like you said, kind of like a vision. At first kind of popped into my mind, and it's the weirdest point for a Mormon to have this pop in his mind. But on my mission, I kept having dreams about going into ministry, which was weird, and I thought I was completely apostate at that point. Like, why am I having these dreams? So, you know, I had that, and that was another shelf item, by the way, was that, because it was like, why am I having these dreams? So after my anger, years, and then finding Christ and that love, I wanted to reach out to, well, first, after my wife told me we can't move out of the state, because that was my first reaction, like, I gotta get out of this place, like, I don't even want to be around them, because when I left, I ended up getting a divorce. So once again, I lost everything. I mean, from my family to my possessions, you know. So after that, I just wanted to help. Really, it just kind of fell into my lap, because it was like I would see these struggling Mormons come into the church or around me in any way, and it was like I was like, here, let's just talk about this, you know. And I would open the Bible, which I have very limited knowledge then, but enough, and just kind of fell in, and you know, instead of going massive like you kind of want to when you first leave, it was just like a one-on-one relationship. And then from that one-on-one relationship, it became multiple one-on-one relationships with these. And then it spread to a class where I taught transitions. And then I taught transitions and Washington Heights class. And then I you know, it kind of grew and grew and grew. And I was kind of hopping around between these classes, kind of trying to figure out which one would resonate a little bit more. And eventually it grew into doing more of a one-on-one in like a classroom when they come in, and shepherding through, and then hitting that small group, and then teaching the Christians in that small group to be equipped with the scriptures and verses that they need to approach these Mormons with. And then when the Mormons come into the group, they're prepared. You know, it was kind of like just a gradual thing, but it just happened. It wasn't really like I want to do it, and I did want to do it, but it wasn't really like, hey, pick me, you know, I'm ready. It was more of like just kind of here, and then it just started growing and growing and growing. So it just kind of happened. So.
One of the things that the first panel said in their closing remarks repeatedly: humility, teachability, and patience. The things that they all talk. You just encapsulated all that in my response. I hope that is hitting you. Humility, teachability, and patience was necessary. The last question is, you have the ears of a room full of Christian leaders right now. And you have had people who have walked each of you. You've had people who have walked alongside you and helped you. How do you advise this room of leaders? What should they do to pastor and shepherd and lead and equip Mormons well?
Such a hard question, it really is. It's a big question. You know, I think the best way, in my mind, to shepherd an ex-Mormon coming out is just pure love. Just loving them, listening to them, because they've just lost everything. So they don't have anyone to talk to. I mean, they've lost their friends, their neighbors, their family, their significant others, their children. I mean, they literally have no one to talk to. So when they do approach you, it needs to be with love. Like, almost like you just want to embrace them and say, I'm here. Like, spill it. You know, I want to talk to you. Here's my number. Call me. Just whatever it is, and then be equipped with the scripture, so that you can go at that, which, I mean, you guys are equipped, but love. I mean, I think that's the biggest key, is loving.
I think for me, looking back, even after I had walked away from the LDS church, I was still defensive of it. So when people would bash on it, I would still like come to its defense, even though like I agreed with them, and I was like, "You're right," but it was still so much ingrained in me and part of other family members that I would still want to protect them and what they believe. So I think it's just so important to realize, like, just because they have come out of, they've had their mind open, they've had, God has finally done something in their life to bring them out of the church. I think we just have to remember that that's still part of their life. And so that time is not an open door for us to discuss what's wrong in the LDS church. And again, from experience, I spent a lot of time hating on it and arguing about it. That's our time to, like Mike said, in love, lead them to Christ. Like, I understand the pain you're going through. It's not, I can't believe we believed that. We were so crazy that we believed that. That's so dumb. How did we not see? It's so easy to get involved in that and start agreeing with what is wrong. But it's so important that we say, that's so hard. I'm so sorry that you're going through this, but let me tell you about this. Let me pull you this way. Let me show you what Jesus has done for me. Let me show you what He's done for these people I know. Let me help you over here. And it's in doing that in love and giving them something to replace what they've lost, rather than just coming alongside them and agreeing with them that what they've lost sucks and what they went through and being lied to and all this other stuff. So having something to move them towards will go so much better until they're ready to start discussing what it is that they feel so, why they were lost, what brought them out of Mormonism. I think leading them into Christ is a more important conversation to have before it's, why are you leaving? Because they don't want to talk about that anymore. They're trying to get out of that. They're trying to get away from that. And so I think just being there to guide them in that and lead them through that process. And then when they're ready to talk about what happened, why they left, how they finally realized, who opened their eyes, and then if they offered up, that's great. But rather than us digging into what they're so disaffected with right then, and what they probably have a little bit of anger and hatred for, rather than us pursuing that conversation, here's this better conversation to have, and it's Jesus.
Things that were shared on the panel before us, I thought were so good. Like Ross saying, be okay with a certain amount of heresy. And I would say, just carry that to the nth degree. Be okay with a certain amount of everything. And then be with them. Incarnate Christ. They've not enjoyed unconditional love and acceptance their whole lives. They've not enjoyed grace and truth. They've not enjoyed witness, true incarnational witness. And so when I started writing my book, it was the month that I got my offer. My daughter comes home from school. Mom, there's a Utah family down the street. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding. I have not had a Utah family down my street ever in Florida for 27 years. And I couldn't wait to go meet the Utah family. I'm like, are they Mormons? I don't know. So I'm like, I'm sure they are. So I go down there and I see a woman walking across the street and I almost hit her with my truck. I'm like, hey, are you the Utah family? Yeah. So I introduce myself. Hey, I want to have you over for lunch. Are you Mormon? Yes. Okay, I won't serve tea. Just had to get that out. She came. And I'm thinking, I'm going to love this woman for the next 10 years. And maybe we'll get to talk about the biblical Jesus. Because my experience has been for 29 years, living in community with my family and embodying Christ to them. And hardly after the first 2 years of very intense, awful conversations with my parents, I haven't talked to them about doctrine for 25 years. I live Jesus to them. I enfold them in the grace and truth of the biblical God. And when I told my parents, well, I have this opportunity. I got a publisher. I'm going to be writing my story. And it felt like I was telling them all over again, I'm leaving the Mormon church. And I was just humming and hawing and fumbling my way through that conversation. And my dad said, honey, what's the rub in you right now? We were on FaceTime. And I said, Dad, I just love you guys so much. And this is a tenuous line. And I don't want to dishonor you. And he said, honey, we know you love us. And we love you. And we know you will not dishonor us. And that's 29 years of just pouring and embodying Jesus to you, or I'd become the confidant for all my siblings, because I'm the grace and truth teller. It's not that there was no truth as far as relational holiness goes, but I wasn't talking to them about, okay, here's the biblical Jesus and here's the right doctrine. I was just absorbing the culture and absorbing cruddy doctrine, absorbing heresy, and loving them. And so it's not gone smoothly, I can tell you, with this book. I'm the anti-Mormon now. Now I'm the anti-Mormon heretic apostate. And it's not going smoothly. You can pray because it's hard. But God is stunning me with how he is creating some pathways for conversation that I haven't had. I got to share the gospel, the whole biblical plan of salvation, and through my story with my littlest sister the other day, which we haven't talked, she's never heard my story. All she heard from my mom was, well, Lisa was fed a bunch of anti-Mormon literature by Gary and left the church, and we loved her. I was like, wow, that's quite a narrative she's written. So Ash said, I want to hear your story from you, because reading it online, I was in Christianity Today, or I wrote an article for them last month. So it's in the October issue if you want to read it, and it's my testimony, and it's heavy. And Ashley said, I was just sitting there with the heaviness of your story by myself, and I couldn't hold the emotion alone, and I just needed to hear it from you. So she invited me to share with her my story, and it's been 27 years. So I would say, hold their story for them, and live in the mystery of all of the mess of it, and then give them vision of that wildly passionate, loving, biblical God.
This is not easy for people to talk about, and they've been very honest with you, and I hope that you treasure the things that they've shared with you. Can we give them a round of applause?